And welcome to my Claris Engage on-demand session, The Power of Your Voice. My name is Vincenzo Menanno. I'm with a company called Beezwax. I'm the Director of FileMaker Development at Beezwax, author of Inspector Pro, and co-coordinator of the DigFM meetings, also known as and listed under Bay Area FileMaker Meetup. I've been a DevCon and Europe conference speaker in the past. I've also introduced 42 Silicon Valley to FileMaker, which I'm very proud of, and I've built some really great friendships there. I'm a D3 and Tableau enthusiast, so data visualization, a fan, and been using FileMaker since 2.1. I'm the father of two wonderful kids, and they keep me incredibly busy. Things that I like: hiking, biking, traveling, architecture, precision engineering, sharp knives, and parking backwards. This is a street in Berlin, and as you can see, they park backwards. And what I like about parking backwards is this mindset of being ready. I like things that work, are functional and precise, and so this just reminds me to be in that state of mind. So the outline for this talk, we'll go over shortcuts. We'll talk about iOS 13 and iOS 14. I have the opportunity to install the public beta of iOS 14 on my iPhone and on my iPad. So it's great to see work being done on shortcuts and some improvements and some new features. So very, very cool what's possible. We'll cover the FileMaker Go options. We'll talk about FileMaker Pro and the two areas that you need to pay attention to get the shortcuts to run in FileMaker Go. We'll look at some example shortcuts. Our first one will be a simple one, hello world. Then we'll look at voice interaction. And voice interaction is interesting with shortcuts because you can trigger the shortcuts manually by clicking a button or running it from a widget. However, if you invoke it from Siri, it's a different user experience. So we'll look at the differences there. We'll look at how easy it is to build JSON and send that as parameters to your scripts in FileMaker Go when you call them there. We'll also look at interacting with the Data API. However, we won't get too deep into that, but there's a lot of opportunities there. So for example, iOS 14 introduces shortcuts that can run on the watch, but there is no FileMaker Go that runs on the watch. So with interacting with the Data API, you can build a shortcut that actually interacts with FileMaker solution that is hosted on your server, but works with the Data API. So very cool what's possible there. We'll look at some troubleshooting tips and tricks, resources, and then we'll do a recap. How I would like you to leave this session: imaginative and curious with what is possible with iOS shortcuts and beyond. The other thing to consider is that voice is a user experience as well. Sometimes we think of user experience just being a visual and how things work as in terms of workflow, etc. But I think voice more and more is going to become so prominent in terms of the ability to blend in voice as a user experience. Two videos I would love for you to watch to get you in the right mood. The first one is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, doing a commercial that they did with Apple, Siri Dominate the Day, when they did this commercial for iPhone 7, which is really fun and playful, but it's really cool. The other thing is this Volkswagen commercial, The Force, Star Wars, Das Auto. Now, this commercial in particular reminds me of the magic of being able to have your computer do actions by just speaking. And so this puts you in the right mood, hopefully. Okay, let's get started. The Shortcuts app is pre-installed as part of iOS 13 and 14. You will need FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Go, and we'll cover details of both these apps shortly. Shortcuts will only run on iOS, so iPhone and iPad, However, you can write shortcuts that interact with the Data API and don't require FileMaker Go. Even shortcuts run on the watch in iOS 14. So that means you can have the experience run on the watch even though you don't have FileMaker Go available on the watch. However, my focus here is on shortcuts and FileMaker Go. I do cover some example with the Data API, but I don't cut into much detail there. Some similarities between shortcuts and Claris Connect. So, for example, shortcuts and Claris Connect both start off with a trigger. Claris Connect starts off with a trigger, and shortcut starts off with a trigger. So shortcut triggers, however, come in a variety of flavors. So when you're in the Shortcuts app and you build a shortcut, you'll get a little tile representing your shortcut. You can click on the tile, and that is one way to trigger the shortcut. The other way is from the widgets section. And if you swipe to the right on your iOS device, you'll get a section of shortcuts that are available here. And just like the tiles in your Shortcuts app, you can click on these little mini tiles to trigger your shortcut. While editing a shortcut, you also have the option to run the shortcut. Down at the bottom is a play button, and that will fire off your shortcut. The ellipse is a place where you go to set the name of the shortcut, and this allows you to then speak the shortcut when you call Siri to actually run that shortcut by that name. It's a good idea to give them not short names like one word, but something longer and descriptive, so they work more reliably as well. And you can also add an icon to the home screen so it looks like an app, and you can trigger the shortcut by clicking the app on your home screen. You can also run shortcuts from a share sheet. So in this case, it's listed as anything, and it brings up a list like this. But let's say you just wanted to run a shortcut when you are sharing an app on the App Store. And so let's say you go look for an app on the App Store, let's say FileMaker Go, and you click on the share button. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll see all the shortcuts that are enabled to be run from the share sheet when sharing an app. In this case, I have a whole bunch of them. So that's cool. Additional triggers under automation, and there's a whole slew of shortcuts that are shared in the community. If you go to the gallery, that's a whole other place to explore. But under automation, there's home automation and personal automations. If you go to personal automations, there's events, travel, and settings. And each of these can fire off, can trigger your script. So for example, when an alarm is stopped, then that's an opportunity to be a trigger that then runs your shortcut. In iOS 14, as I said, some of the exciting news is that shortcuts can run on the watch. And there's some other automation suggestions that are available. And there's a cool way to group shortcuts into folders, and that helps with organizing them in widgets. So again, under automation in iOS 14, personal automation, there's some new ones, and the new ones are sleep, email, message, battery level, and charger. However, email is somewhat limited, that you cannot get the subject or the body, and so not ideal if you're looking to do something with the contents of the email. However, both the email and the message, you can use them as triggers for your shortcuts. What's really cool is widgets in iOS 14. So widgets are a big deal, and they're customizable, and you can stack multiple groups on them. Just like over here, there's a little ellipse on the right there that shows you that you can cycle through different sets of them. So very, very cool. Good use of space, and also the ability to put them anywhere on your device. In the FileMaker Go app, when you click on the My Apps button on the bottom left and then click on the gear on the top right, there's a setting for Manage Shortcut Donations. And as you start working with your files, there'll be files that are enabled that show up in the enabled section. And if you want to temporarily disable some files or permanently remove them, this is where you would go to control what shortcut sees from the point of view of FileMaker Go. In FileMaker Pro, you would have to create a file and turn on the extended privilege, allow URLs to run FileMaker scripts, FM URL script. So that would need to be enabled for the privilege that is associated with the account that you log in with. You also need to then donate your script. So you would right-click on a script and enable shortcut donation. And when you do that, you get a little microphone telling you that this script has been donated to Siri, to the shortcuts. We'll cover some examples next. So let's dive in to the next video. We'll look at our Hello World example. So the first thing we'll need to do is create the FileMaker file, which will have one field and a script. Then we'll enable the FM URL script extended privilege on the account that would have that gets logged in. So we'll enable that extended privilege. We'll write a script and enable shortcut donation for that script. We'll close the file, we'll send the file to the device and open it with FileMaker Go. We'll write a shortcut, and then we'll run the shortcut. So let's take a look at the FileMaker file. Again, very simple file. It's called Shortcuts Example. And let's take a look first at the field. Again, we have a single field. It's a field called data. It's a text field. And then if we go into security, we have the admin account, which is the account that we logged in with on the device, that we'll be logging in with. And if we go to advanced settings and double click on this, we'll see the extended privileges here are already turned on for allow URLs to run FileMaker scripts, FM URL script. That's required for this to work. So that's on. And next, let's look at our script. We have a very simple script here. And this script basically gets the parameter, sets a variable called data, goes to a layout, enter browse mode, create a new record, set the field with that variable's content, and then commit the record. And now to enable this script to be donated, all you need to do is go to scripts, enable shortcut donation. You can do it that way, or you can right click on the script and do the same thing. You'll see a little icon here that shows like a little microphone, and that microphone is telling you that this is going to be donated to the shortcuts when FileMaker Go is launched. So let's close the file, send the file over, and in the QuickTime video that I recorded, we'll look at setting up that shortcut. So I already sent the file, so let's go back into here and let's play the recording. So the first thing we'll do is we'll launch FileMaker Go, and we'll take a look at how many records are in here, and there's 0 records. So we'll go back out of here, and then we'll go ahead and launch shortcuts. And up here on the top right, we'll click Add a new shortcut, click Add an action, type in text to type in some text. Let's do that again, type in text. We'll type in here, hello world. This is a kind of a static string. And there's a lot of shortcut actions that are available.
So here we'll now set a variable. So variable, set variable. We'll give the variable a name, just like you give a name to a variable in FileMaker. And Shortcuts has a really cool way to be able to use variables. You can use set magic variable, and what that does is tells you where the variables would be that you can pull from. So we just clicked on text and it loaded it. Next, we'll go ahead and add another action. We'll go to apps. We'll look for FileMaker Go here, and then we'll click on Run FileMaker Go. Choose a file. So we have the file already on our device. So this Shortcuts example. We'll click on Script, and it knows that there is a script in there called Get Data, and then we'll click. And now here is where you choose the variable. So what we'll want is data. So we're ready to run it. Down here in the bottom right is the button to run it. So we'll click on it, and presto, there's our first record in our example, and that's our first shortcut. Talk about voice interaction and other ways that you interact with the shortcut when it runs. So if you run the shortcut by clicking the play button at the bottom, what you'll get is a text area to type in your answer. So in this example, we're gonna cover the 3 different ways that shortcuts can run and what the user experience is. So in this case, you'll get a text box to type in your text when it's triggered manually. If you run it by invoking it, by calling it, by Siri, so speaking the name of the shortcut. So say you call Siri and then you say, this is the shortcut I want to run. Then what you'll do is you'll get the Siri assistant coming up and asking you for the input, and then you provide the answer, and then it will submit the text. The next part is if you have an automation that's set to run, if you have it set up, it will give you a message that it is running your automation, and then it allows you to tap to respond, and then you can also respond to it, and then in this case it will also give you the prompt to enter your answer. So and the results all show up in this sample database. So let's look at the video. We're going to use the same database, the shortcuts example database that has one field and one script. Basically, we're just sending one parameter. So let's take a look at the video here. So first, we'll jump into FileMaker Go. We'll see here that we still have one record, our previous record. So next, we'll go into shortcuts and we'll create a new shortcut by clicking the plus icon. In this case, we're going to ask for input. We're going to ask for input, and the prompt is going to be, what is your favorite color? And then we're done. Then we're going to ask, then we're going to add another action. We're going to go to apps and choose FileMaker Go. And then we're going to choose the same file, shortcuts example. We're going to choose the same script, get data, and we're going to put in a parameter provided input. And next, we're going to go ahead and run it, and you'll see here that we get a prompt to enter our text. And sure enough, we now have 2 records in our file. We're going to go modify this slightly, and we're going to give it a shortcut name so that we can invoke it by asking Siri to run it. So once we do that, we'll call up Siri and we'll say, ask me for my favorite color, and then it's listening. It's listening. We type in what we wanted, which is turquoise, and we got the result in there successfully. Next, so we have 3 records. Next, we'll go back to shortcuts, and we're now going to write an automation. So this is the other way that you can invoke the shortcut. So this is using the automation. In this case, when an app is launched, when the app called App Store is launched, we're going to run a shortcut. And we're going to tell it to run ask me for a color. And so we're going to go ahead and click done. And we're going to go ahead and then run the App Store. And there it is at the top. There's a notification. We click run. We type in our color. And we click done. And sure enough, it sends it over to the FileMaker Go app. Next, we'll modify this and we'll change it not to ask before running. So whenever this automation is triggered, it will perform actions on your behalf without asking first. So now we'll run the app again. It just runs the shortcut, and then it gives you an opportunity to dismiss it. But if you click to respond, it allows you to respond. And there we have our answer. So there's other cool things with the shortcuts that you can do. Let's go back to shortcuts and edit our shortcut. And this time we're going to change text to number, and we're going to ask for your favorite number. Click done. And then we're going to run it. And we'll see that the user experience is going to be different. So the user experience here now comes up with a panel that asks you for a number. So there's some really cool things with dates and times. And we also saw that we don't need to set a parameter necessarily, set a variable. We can just take the provided input and pass it right to as a parameter to the FileMaker script. So let's look at the next example where we'll look at passing some JSON parameters. So for this example, we're going to look at how we can send JSON data from shortcuts to the FileMaker Go script. Very easy to do. As a matter of fact, I was surprised how easy it is to do. So we'll ask for 4 sets of parameters, and we're gonna ask for input. So when you execute it with Siri, you're going to actually be prompted from Siri these questions. So project number, what project number? Then you'll speak a number, and it'll set the variable project number to the provided input. Then the start timestamp, which will ask you for when the work was done. And this is really actually cool because it's very flexible. You could say last Tuesday, you could say yesterday, you could say this morning at 3 in the morning or whatever. So it's very flexible, and it understands all the different nuances of dates and times. So very cool. And then we have the task, what work was done, and then we have the duration, how long did you work. The order doesn't matter, so you can change the order of these. They're kind of in pairs, but you've defined these individual variables. Then next what we'll do is we'll create a dictionary, and the dictionary will have the names of the items in the dictionary on the left, and the variables, which is the data that it's carrying over, on the right. And then when we run it and we send the result of the dictionary, we'll actually get just JSON. So we add dictionary items for each of the parameters, then call the FileMaker action. So we specify the file, the script again, and the parameter. So here's what the dialog looks like when you run the shortcut manually. So this will be presented to input the project number. This will be presented to input the start date and time. This will be what work was done, and this will be the amount of work that was worked. So, and this is the resulting JSON that gets submitted. And before we jump into the example here, let's take a look at the file real quick. So it's similar to the other file that I had, except just a few more fields. So these are the actual data fields. And based on, so we have the project number, the date that the work started, the start and end time, the task that was done, and the duration. So basically, we populate the JSON into this data field, and then that's what we see here. And then the script does the work here to extract it all out and put it into the individual fields. So let's go ahead and watch the video. And this file is on the device locally, so it's not hosted, but so it's just already deployed on there. So we'll watch the video now, and I'll walk you through what's going on here. So first, we launch FileMaker Go, and we'll look to see that we have no records. Okay, and then we'll switch over to shortcuts. The shortcut is already written. Basically, those are the pairs. We have the number for the project number. Then we have the text for what type of work was done. Then we have the date and time when the work was done, and then the number of how much time was worked. And that goes into this variable called duration. And down here we'll see the dictionary. And then as a cool thing for debugging, it's called show result. And we can place it right after the dictionary. And when we run this, we'll see a preview of the JSON. So when we run it, this is what the interaction looks like when you run it manually. So you're typing in data for each of these dialogues that it's asking you for feedback. This is the timestamp dialog. And once you fill it out and click done, then it captures that data and moves on. How much time was worked? 1.5 hours. And there's the show result. And we click done. It'll then proceed to the next step, which is then create the record in FileMaker and send the JSON. So very nice that we actually have pure JSON that we can send very easily. That's great. So now we're going to run it with Siri. So we're going to get rid of the show result debugging thing, and then we just run it with Siri. So we ask Siri to log time entry, and then 3715. Scripting work. Yesterday at 3 p.m. 2 hours. So there you go. Very, very cool. In this video, we're going to talk about how we can have shortcuts interact with the Data API. So we have a shortcut here, and all the steps of this shortcut are done in such a way that they interact with the Data API, and there is no FileMaker Go here involved. So this first group of steps establishes some variables and requests a token. Next, what we do is we'll dictate some text as input, then we'll create a record and we'll get back a record ID. We'll then next select a photo, and then we'll update the record with that record ID and update the record to include the photo on that record. And then we'll close our connection. So everything that we looked at so far here does not interact with FileMaker Go. However, you could add another step at the end that would call FileMaker Go and the hosted file. Obviously, it would have to be hosted because it interacts with the Data API. You would call that file, you would authenticate into it, and then you would run a script in that file. You'd pass in the record ID, and the script would take care of going to a layout and presenting and finding that record and presenting that record. And the end result could look something like this. Okay, so there's a little bit of text that we captured as input, and the photo. Now the use case here could be some house inspection where the person is walking around the house and they want to take a photo, but maybe their hands are tied up with, they have a folder or binder in one hand and they have the photo and the phone on the other. So the person could actually just invoke Siri and ask to log a photo for the home inspection and dictate some text first, and then take a photo and update the record. And then in this case, we could show the record, but in the other case, you don't need to. You just need to keep adding records, let's say, to a particular project. Now, the cool thing with this is, as I mentioned early on, in iOS 14, you can have shortcuts that interact with the watch. So not that you'd be taking pictures with the watch necessarily, but what I'm saying is you could have a shortcut that goes and gets some data for you, and it can interact with FileMaker even though there is no FileMaker Go on the watch. So there's lots of possibilities you could explore by blending in some opportunity to work with the Data API and shortcuts. Okay, this one is a last minute one, and it just snuck in there. And was an idea I had and ran it by Fabio, and we prototyped a little example here. So basically, shortcuts can trigger a Claris Connect flow that also talks to FileMaker's server and then sends a response back to Claris Connect and then sends a response back to Siri shortcuts. However, it's just a proof of concept that you can also trigger Claris Connect flows from Siri shortcuts. And, again, FileMaker server is just one example here, but Claris Connect can connect to so many things that instead of trying to run a shortcut to do that work, you can leverage, the Claris Connect platform to go off and talk to other systems and return back a result. So very cool. I'll just show you the different components here. So this is the Claris Connect flow, and we have a webhook that is the trigger, and then it executes a script in FileMaker on the FileMaker server, passes in the parameters that we passed into it. Then it gets a reply back from the server and then converts it to JSON format and replies with the JSON data. So again, this is the webhook is the trigger. On the FileMaker script, very simply, it gets a set of parameters, sets some variables, and then sends a response back to the call. And so this here is the shortcut. So the first part is defining the webhook, dictating some text to send to the Claris Connect, and then once it sends it off, it then talks to FileMaker's server, runs the script, returns a result, sends it back, and then it gets a response, and then it speaks the result. And basically, this is what it looks like. So again, just proof of concept that you can do a lot with shortcuts in different ways. And this was just a little kind of bonus bit here that we added at the end. So hope you like it. Hey, welcome back. This is our recap here, and we're going to go over a number of different things. So first off, we're going to go over some troubleshooting. So in the examples I showed, I had a file on the device, and so I wasn't connecting to a hosted file. So the local file is nice, it's snappy, etc. But to add or modify scripts, it's a pain because you basically have to send a new file to the device and replace the one that's there. So that's a little bit of a pain. So syncing shortcuts between devices is also something that you want to be aware of. So let's say I have, let's say my iPad and my iPhone, and I write a shortcut. And in the Shortcuts app, in the settings, there's a place where you can specify, sync between devices. If you have that on, and you're talking to a local file, when you call FileMaker Go action and shortcuts and specify the file, it will actually tell you, shortcuts example on the iPhone or shortcuts example on the iPad. So it remembers that, and so it kind of gives you a heads up. So when it syncs to let's say I wrote it on my phone and it syncs to the iPad, it will tell me that it's trying to talk to the iPhone file. So that's something to be aware of. It will probably prompt you to ask you where's the file, which one is the right file to use, because the file is not on the other device. So something to be aware of. If it's a hosted file, then one of the things you need to be aware of is if you add scripts and you want to donate new scripts to shortcuts, then you have to close the file in FileMaker Go to then, when you open it again, at that time is when it donates the scripts that are available for donation. Make sure the script is donated, otherwise you won't see it. That's another thing. And then also make sure that FM URL script is the extended privilege for which the privilege set that the account you log in with is enabled. Otherwise, calling that script or seeing that file won't even work. So, so allow URLs to run FileMaker scripts. FM URL script extended privilege needs to be on. Editing shortcuts on the iPad is much easier. There were some screenshots of some windows. For example, the last example I just gave with connecting to Claris Connect, that was done on the iPad. Just much more screen space to be able to see what you're doing. Be careful when scrolling. Sometimes you can grab an action and accidentally move it, thinking that you were scrolling. So that can be a pain. So there's a little undo feature, so you can always quickly undo, but be careful when you scroll. Syncing between devices, we covered that. So this is what it looks like when you run it on the iPad. So let's see. There is another setting for shortcuts. So there's the sync setting right there, iCloud sync. But there's a sharing security setting. So let's say you download some shortcuts from the gallery or from other sources. It has a funny verbiage here. It says allow untrusted shortcuts. Well, if you trust the person you're getting it from, well, you're allowing that shortcut to be installed. So anyway, just a heads up, that option needs to be on. Otherwise, you will not be able to import shortcuts from other people. This is a small one, but it kind of bugs me. And this is if FileMaker Go is hibernated, and you call a shortcut, then it has to re-authenticate. So when it comes back, it has to re-authenticate. If you trigger the shortcut while you are in FileMaker Go, so for example, if I just call out, "Hey Siri, just run this shortcut," while I'm in FileMaker Go, then it seems like it's almost on another layer. It runs on top and then comes back right to FileMaker Go, and it doesn't have to do the re-authentication part. If it's a hosted file, it is actually kind of painful to wait for it. So heads up that might be a nice user experience to be in the app already, which is kind of cool. So, okay, building a shortcut to take a picture or a barcode. This is one of the first things I experimented with, and I ended up deciding that it wasn't working. Taking a picture, building the shortcut to take a picture and then send it. I guess because it's using FMP URL as the mechanism, and the picture may be so large, and it didn't work in some cases. It didn't send the whole picture. So I think the the two options there would be to either connect to the data API as one of the examples I had to send it, or to just simply call a FileMaker script that will call the action to use the camera and take the picture right within FileMaker scripting. So yeah, better off to call the scripts to interact with the camera. If you really want to use shortcuts, then send the data using the data API, as I mentioned. That's it. Really a big thank you to listen in on this, and I hope it inspires you. I also want to thank my Beezwax team for all the support they give me, and a special thank you to Fabio Bossio for all his help. By the way, he has two great blog posts that I want to mention about shortcuts that we have published here, and more are coming from him. So really, really big shout out to Fabio for all his help in helping me research some of these things. Last few possibilities, shortcuts only runs on iOS devices, as we said. However, Claris did mention they are looking into an Android app, and what I researched about some similar shortcuts app on Android didn't seem much there, and I'm not an Android user, so I'm not going to say much about that. But it's exciting to see that this is going to happen, hopefully. So we'll see what happens when it gets there. However, the other cool things that we discovered is you can connect to the data API and, again, run shortcuts to connect to data directly that way, which is very exciting. So you can also connect to Claris Connect in the last example we gave. Lots of creative uses. I mean, there's all kinds of little enhancements that you can think of for your clients, and sometimes just taking the extra mile and building a proof of concept and showing your client might inspire them to maybe jump on. So it's a very in my exploration of the shortcuts app and exploring and digging deeper in some areas, I'm really pleasantly surprised at the level of detail that is in there in different places. So, for example, the timestamp date format has a custom format that you can set, and you can set it to something that works with FileMaker directly. So there's a lot of detail in shortcuts, and unfortunately, this doesn't even scratch the surface of what's possible. We just covered the integration with FileMaker Go. So really, really, really excited about what's possible. Also, in conclusion, we need to consider voice as part of UX, something I mentioned early on. The user experience with voice is something very interesting and worthwhile exploring. So I invite you to start thinking about that. Some of the resources I offer here in researching this, there's an Apple user guide for shortcuts. There's a field guide by Max Sparky that I bought this course to go over and learn more about shortcuts, and that was really helpful. So, and it's very economical as well too. I found this Routine Hub as a community around Siri shortcuts that has a lot of activity going on there, so I invite you to check that out. Udemy has a course. I haven't looked at it, but this is another one I'm listing. And then the last one is LinkedIn Learning from that has some course there available for Siri shortcuts and FileMaker. Again, we covered shortcuts. It's bundled in iOS 13 and 14. There's FileMaker Go options that you should be aware of. And there's FileMaker Pro security and script donations that you must do to get this to work. We looked at some example shortcuts: hello world, voice interaction, different interaction methods, how we can send JSON parameters, how we can interact with the Data API, and not listed here, but how we can interact with Claris Connect as well. So very, very cool. Troubleshooting, we covered that, and then resources. And last thing, some of the things that Fabio had explored. He built some chatbots, intents with Lex. There's lots with voice interaction that we should be exploring. And anyway, it just gives you a taste of what's possible. Intents is very cool. However, in iOS 14, intents are available for developers to build into their apps. But I hope one day we may get intents in some way right in shortcuts. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. And I hope it inspires you.